Hey guys, we're here on day 23. We're starting a new unit today. If you pulled this video up from Google Classroom, make sure you reference up here. All the information's the same, but I don't know. Sometimes I think in my brain the clarity on here is a little bit better. Okay, so making sure that we're day 23 here. Share your daily blogs, okay, to me today. All right, make sure that you're keeping on track of this. If you're watching this, you should be having kept up with what we've been doing. Okay, so anyway, if you're bouncing back because you missed some stuff and you might have done poorly on the exam, that's all right. Make sure you go back and get caught up. Okay, so those daily blogs are easy points. There's 3 easy points today, and those are going to kind of serve as your assignment for today as well. That'll take you a little bit of time as we go through some stuff. So you want to take out the note page for today. Okay, and again, you'll fill this out as we go. You're going to want to focus on what is in red, okay, when we get to our notes. So as you can see, these are the first part of the notes. If you focus on what's in red, you're filling out these definitions here, okay? So as we're going, we're going to give you some time to fill out these daily blogs here, okay? And again, as I mentioned, I want you to share these with me today. And this chapter, just to kind of preview here, is, kind of for you guys, um, in the sense that hopefully you're going to learn something for um, what you are trying to plan to do, right? So we're going to look at some of the things of the United States economy. What are some trends? What are some things to expect? How are wages determined? And kind of going from there. So take a second, pause this, answer these questions, and again, kind of self-analyze yourself a little bit as we're all of a sudden halfway through September, and your senior years are moving along pretty quick all of a sudden. Okay, so the next part is what I want you to define as what your definition of accomplishing the quote unquote American dream is, and again, like what is your ideal lifestyle going to look like? And again, that can mean a whole lot of different things for different people. But anyway, I want you to think about it. Make sure that you write something down. Pause it if you have to. And then we're moving on to number 3. Okay, and you're rating the importance of these things. Okay, so you're going from most important thing to least important characteristic of what you are choosing to do. Okay, so again, even if you haven't decided what you're going to do yet, you can decide what of these 6 things are most important. Okay, and so just kind of rank those. Again, realize that the money you make isn't going to be necessarily everything. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into what you are trying to do. Okay, and hopefully you can kind of bounce back to your answers eventually, and be able to say, okay, I either feel real good about what I'm going to do, or hey, maybe I need to reanalyze what I'm going to do and what I thought as we move forward. Okay, so let's get started here. We're talking about what is referred to as the civilian labor force today, okay? And that's going to be basically at the end of the day the people you're going to compete for jobs against, right? And so certain people aren't part of the labor force. So notice that we're only talking about people that are willing and able to work, okay? So that's going to disqualify, so to speak, retired people. It's going to disqualify people that are too young. Notice our age group is 16 years or older, okay? It can disqualify people that I guess you could say have won the lottery and aren't looking for a job. Stay-at-home parents aren't part of the labor force right now, which they can join it once their kids go to school or whatever their situation is. But as we define it, that's who we're looking at. We'll talk much more about unemployment in a later chapter as we keep moving along here. Sometimes we can hear people described as different ways in different ways. Sometimes we hear the term blue collar. Sometimes we hear the term white collar. Those terms are, to be honest with you, a little bit outdated. And even in even in terms of in the year 2020, like we don't use these terms as much anymore. We're seeing a new group of people kind of join what is referred to as the service sector, and sometimes they're going to be described as white collar workers. So, for example, a teacher would be considered in the service sector. I'm providing you with a service, okay? But we could also say that a car mechanic, and teachers would be considered white collar. We can also say of a car mechanic, a blue collar, that's providing a service for people as well. And so, the kind of difference is what's like if I sold you a car, like I'm selling you something, right? I'm not providing a service where you don't get something physical out of it. Okay. So like getting a haircut, same thing. That's a service. So, kind of broadly defined, but the healthcare industry is the biggest service industry, or is the fastest growing, sorry, service industry today. Okay. And you've probably heard that, people are, you know, getting old and they're living longer and they need help, and their kids don't have time to take care of them as they get old. And so they hire people to do it. And so, that industry is growing extremely quick. Sometimes we can also define people as unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled, sometimes professional. That simply refers to how much training does it take to be able to do stuff. The more training, kind of the different way you're going to be, I guess you could say, categorized. Okay. Which again, some different types of jobs are going to be categorized in different ways. I was just watching something the other day that was saying that how police officers are professionals. I was watching a documentary on Netflix or whatever. So, but sometimes people can be considered in both different things, in both categories. But again, think about the skills that people have acquired. So, like for example, look at the unskilled labor, in terms of like what does it take that you can put on your resume to what do you have to put on your resume to be able to get a job, right? Anybody can be hired for these types of jobs. It takes a little bit of training, a little bit more training for skilled, and quite a bit of training for professional. Okay, and even on the job skills as well. So for these next few slides, what I want you to do, all right, is I want you to write down something interesting that you see. So your notes aren't guided anymore. So you're going to be down here. What is something interesting that you find from each of these next 4 slides? Okay. So anyway, we'll give you a second to do that. I'll scroll through these, pause it if you need to. This is showing how old people are staying in the labor force. Okay, so notice the years down here. So for example, I thought it was interesting that people are working longer and longer, right? Part of that is because they're not having as many children, and so the younger part of the population is not that big of a percentage. And this is showing unemployment rates by how educated someone is. Some stats that you've probably seen before, but write something down for each of those, and we'll keep moving forward here. Okay, so pretty simple. How is the wage determined, right? So you're all in the boat where you're at least in the situation where, you're thinking like, okay, well, I want to at least make some money to be able to, survive. And so just like with any other supply and demand, right, we're going to have a certain amount of people that can supply a certain skill. That's going to be our supply. We used an example of like being a trash man before, right, or working at the dump where no one was going to do it for $5 an hour, right? But hey, I could convince you for $100 an hour, you might want to work at the dump. Okay. So we also have the dynamic of how much do people demand stuff, right? Are people willing to pay you to do certain things? Now, the more I can set myself apart from other people, right? So let's say that a teacher gets their master's degree. Well, not every teacher has their master's degree. So that might shift the demand for teachers with master's degrees because they're supposedly better teachers. It might shift our supply to the left. Well, notice what happens to our wage. It increases. And let's say I really want teachers that have doctoral degrees. So let's like say teachers that work at colleges, they're professors. Well, that might shift our supply. Again, it's eliminating people with those skills, right? So we're shifting that even more to the left. And we have to pay those people more money. Okay. Now, we also have the demand for it. So let's say people stop going to college, just for the sake of an argument here. So let's say people stop going to college because they are sick of it, or they're lazy, or whatever reason there might be. So let's say we have a change in taste and preferences, right? So we shift our demand over to the left too. So if people want to pay people to do stuff, right? Well, that's or don't want. Sorry, in this case, that's going to decrease the demand in that case, and we won't pay professors nearly as much, right? We don't have to pay professors to teach people how to um, type anymore. For example, that's not their job. They teach us how that would be completely different than in the 1950s. Okay, so we don't have a demand for those types of professors anymore. And so, the demand and the supply, they interact based on different things. Okay. And again, it's just like anything else. Eventually, the market's going to figure it out, right? Now, your overall skill is going to come from a few different things. Some of it's natural, right? Some of it's God given. Some of it's going to be stuff that you're born with. That's your talent. Okay. Sometimes it becomes from motivation. I've labeled that as in your initiative. Sometimes it comes from perceived education, right? I can be a teacher, so for the sole reason that that Indiana gave me a teacher's license. I have to jump through the hoops. I have to go to college to get that. Okay. But we know that we've all had teachers that we agree with and get along with, and we disagree with and we don't get along with, right? But since we have that diploma, the state of Indiana says we can be a teacher. Okay, so sometimes it's kind of perceived skill, so to speak, when I use that term skill there. Okay, training on the job, sometimes experience. Again, teachers get raises for how many years they've taught. Using myself as an example, sometimes if we've got to convince people to go somewhere that's not necessarily very desirable, say like Alaska or Antarctica, I don't know where you would go off the top of my head, but we might pay those people more money as well because we've got to convince them to go there. So what is like a normal amount of money to make? Okay, so I have this number here. I looked it up just today. All right, is I have this median household income. That's kind of a key word. Okay, household income means that you're going to add spouses together. So husband and wife, whatever. Okay, you're going to add them together. Okay, so as an example, obviously like a mom and a dad. Now, sometimes the mom doesn't work, sometimes the dad doesn't work, right? But the median, meaning right in the middle, meaning that 50% of people make more than $63,000 a year. 50% of households, sorry, make less than $63,000 a year. So, like, what's normal? Well, this number's kind of normal. Okay, probably a little bit lower than what you would envision. Um, However, if you live in Elkhart, Indiana, that is not a horrible income. I wouldn't say that that should be your goal to make that much. All right. But you can definitely get by on that amount of money in Elkhart, Indiana, but probably not quite the way that you would envision. So, how can you use that number to try to figure out like how much money you should try to make? Well, if you do the math, okay, if we take if for $5 an hour, okay, you multiply it by 40 hours a week, assuming you work a full week, assuming you work a full year, okay, 50 weeks a year. I know there's 52. We're going to give you some vacation time. All right. If you multiply it out, it's for every $5 an hour you make, that's $10,000 a year. Okay. So if you're like, hey, listen, I've got 20 bucks an hour. This is a great job right now. I've got 20 an hour. If you multiply that out, that's about $40,000 a year. Okay, and it's not the perfect math, alrighty, but again, it's a starting point of where you can start to analyze what you're doing. Okay, now there are some other compensations. Again, I had you start off by ranking these different things that might be important to you, right? Well, you've got paid insurance, you've got vacations, right? So being a teacher, I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't enjoy summers. I don't work hard during the summers, right? It's a nice deal for me. I enjoy that. But if we also get company cars, we can even say, hey, if a job pays for your cell phone, those are bills that we don't have to worry about, that we can spend our income on other stuff, if those things are provided by our uh, employers. Obviously, the government does restrict our wages as well. Our federal minimum wage is 7.25. Um, we talked a whole lot in supply and demand about how minimum wage is I don't think is very applicable in Elkhart, Indiana right now. You can go out the door and walk down the street and be hired by Monday making $15 an hour or so. So minimum wage, as low as it is, for most of us, it probably isn't necessarily very applicable. Okay, so that's what I've got for you today. All righty. Again, if you're somebody that has been getting behind on this stuff, make sure you're staying on top of it. Make sure you get those 3 daily blogs. That's basically your assignment for today. Tomorrow, we will have another assignment where you're going to do some research. We'll talk about some wage trends in the United States, look at a little bit of what is referred to as the wage gap, some disparity in wages between people, and we'll be done with this chapter already. Okay, so it's a short chapter. We're going to keep moving ahead. I hope you have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.